Welcome to the High Income Business Writing Podcast, helping you propel your writing business to a whole new level. And now, here's your host, Ed Gandia.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the High Income Business Writing Podcast, the number one podcast for freelance writers, copywriters, and solo marketers who want to earn more in less time doing work they love for better clients. With over 1.3 million downloads from listeners just like you across 101 countries. I've been hesitating to say this publicly because I know how it sounds, and I don't want to be that guy, that guy who sounds hypey or alarmist. I've built my reputation over the past decade and a half by being, and I hope you will agree with me, by being practical, measured, by being focused on actionable advice that actually helps writers build better businesses. But the stakes have gotten too high for me to stay quiet anymore. The data is becoming undeniable. And frankly, I feel a responsibility to my community, my tribe, to share what I'm seeing, even if it makes me a bit uncomfortable. Most writers know something is changing, and this is different. Even if you've been at this for 2-3 decades, you can feel it. This is different from past shifts in the market. I've been through recessions. The 2008 financial crisis for me and for many of my peers was just terrible. I've been through a few of those, not quite as bad as 2008, 2009, but this just feels different. And almost everyone I talk to says they feel that it's different in their gut. They just know something's going on. Maybe you're getting fewer referrals. Maybe clients are asking different questions. Maybe you're seeing competitors win work that you used to get easily yourself. But here's what I've noticed. Most writers, even though they're seeing the shift, they can't pinpoint exactly what's going on. They can't pinpoint what's happening or why it's happening. I truly believe that a big part of this shift over the past 2 years, since 2023 or so, has been about economics. And there's plenty of data supporting this. And if you've been following me for a while, you've heard this from me before, and I still feel this way. The economy is not in great shape, and it hasn't been in great shape for a while, even if some of the numbers that we're supposed to believe indicate otherwise. When you look more closely, you see that there are some problems, especially in some fields, marketing being one of them. According to Forrester Research, the growth rate of B2B marketing budgets has slowed significantly. Only 35% of decision makers expected an increase of more than 5% in 2025 for their budgets, with most of them anticipating an increase of just 1 to 4%, which is barely ahead of inflation. So really effectively flat in real terms. And by early this year in 2025, 77% of marketing leaders were handling budgets that were either flat or declining, with 38% reporting an outright cut of at least 3%. Now, let's put that in perspective, because some of those numbers might seem bad, but okay, so what does that mean? The share of revenue dedicated to marketing among B2B organizations dropped to 7.7% in 2024 from 9.1% in 2023. Now, I don't have the latest numbers for 2025, but I will say that last year, that drop was the second lowest figure in the past decade, according to B2B Marketing World. So the economy is a big, big factor, and I think it's still playing a big role. Plus, we had some geopolitical issues. We got wars. We had a big election in the U.S. last year, which is really creating a lot of inaction, a lot of let's just wait and see what happens. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. But my opinion has shifted a little bit, actually quite a bit. And what I believe today is that AI is now having a noticeable effect on the amount of writing work out there. So I don't believe that it's just an economic factor. I really think that sometime over the past year or so, AI has really made big headway internally with a lot of companies, and there haven't been huge announcements, and that's why we're not seeing it. But what you are seeing, if you're a freelancer, if you're a solo marketer, if you're a consultant, is that the work doesn't seem to be there like it used to be. Definitely a big, big change. Now, whatever the real reason is for this shift, here's what writers I talk to are telling me. They know they're losing ground, but they can't identify where or how to respond to that strategically. And that's exactly what I want to address today in this episode. Not just what I think is happening and why, but also where I think this is all going and what I would recommend you start thinking about and start doing as quickly as possible. Now, let's talk about the schools of thought about where all of this AI stuff is heading, because, I mean, we could argue there's several schools of thought, but I can almost divide them into two different ones. One camp says that massive disruption is coming and it's going to get bad before it gets better. That, it's mostly negative. And even if there's light at the end of the tunnel, it's going to be bad times and really hard times for a while. So let's say that's camp number one or school of thought number one. Now, you got a few people leading this camp. You have people all over the place, and even people in Silicon Valley, which you wouldn't necessarily expect, because many times what we believe Silicon Valley is selling us is this rosy pie in the sky idea. And you don't have a lot of people with kind of a negative bent on what's going on in school of thought number one. Vinod Khosla is one of them. And he recently predicted that within the next 5 years, any economically valuable job humans can do, AI will be able to do 80% of it. So 80% of all jobs will be able to be done by an AI. Doesn't mean they will. He's talking about capability. And he thinks that by 2040, the need to work will actually go away entirely. I've heard this from several other thought leaders in AI who are really pointing to this kind of, it's just hard to even talk about or even imagine a world where there's just infinite abundance, energy costs have gone down to virtually zero, and there's no real need to work. Everything's infinitely available to you. And now the real challenge becomes finding meaning and purpose in your life when so much of your identity was tied to what you did for work. So I'm not going to really get into that. I think it's a fascinating topic and a fascinating theory because it brings up all kinds of interesting things that we probably need to start really thinking through right now, if that's a possibility. But I want to kind of keep this episode as practical as possible. There's a few other people in this camp. I'm only naming some randomly. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, the company behind Claude, who told Axios last year that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level white-collar jobs and spike unemployment to 10 to 20% in the next 1 to 5 years. That's pretty terrifying. And the data seems to support some of his concerns. In 2024 alone, over 152,000 tech employees lost their jobs across 546 companies. That is a lot of people. Many of those companies explicitly said that they were reallocating resources to AI projects, and that was the reason for the layoffs. What makes this different from past automation waves is that AI is now targeting cognitive tasks, things like writing, coding, data analysis. So basically, AI is disrupting white-collar jobs in fields like software development, legal analysis, finance, and of course, writing. as opposed to what automation has traditionally wiped out, which was blue collar work, blue collar jobs. So the other difference, though, is the speed at which the disruption is happening. And this is one that I'm actually frustrated sometimes that is not discussed enough. And again, we're still in school of thought, number one, which is this is going to be bad. A lot of thought leaders talk about the fact that, hey, when there's disruption, there's actually job creation, and there are more jobs created than jobs lost with a new technology. And that's all fine and good. I've read all about that. I understand it. It's true. What I wish they would talk more about is the speed of change. In virtually every example they cite, we're talking about 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And that's enough time for workers to basically retrain, retool, or things to kind of catch up. But this is very different. This is happening. We're going to talk more about that here in a few minutes. This is happening at such a speed that I worry about whether or not we can actually catch up, whether or not people can retool, retrain, new jobs can actually be onboarded, and we can basically create an on-ramp to kind of a new economy or a new world. So again, I'm not going to dive too much into that. It's theoretical, but I think you have to agree that, hey, even if all this is true about past disruptions, this is very different. We're comparing apples to oranges, and will we be able to catch up as quickly as we have in the past, considering the speed of this disruption? So that's goal number one. Not very optimistic, but we have to look into it. I've read books on this. I don't like it, but I think we have to face reality, and we have to look at all perspectives and all angles, in my opinion. So that's goal number one. Goal number two says the market's going to course correct, and it won't be nearly as bad as the doomsayers claim. So I've already kind of set that up. I talked about it just a minute ago, but let's get into this. And there are many people leading this camp. David Autor is an MIT economist who's definitely a loud voice here. He's literally the world's top authority on how automation affects labor markets, which is really interesting. That's really what many of us worry about, how this is going to affect our work. And he points out that even though a recent Gallup poll found that 75% of US adults believe AI will lead to fewer jobs, this fear, he believes, is misplaced. He stresses that the industrialized world is actually swimming in jobs, and it's going to stay that way because AI is going to create, again, an enormous amount of new jobs, new opportunities that have never existed before. Jobs, careers that we can't even fathom right now. Like, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the host was just kind of riffing, but he was naming some categories of professions that I would have never even thought of. And they had to do a lot with just creating experiences for people. I mean, it really starts getting theoretical at that point because we really have no idea. And there's so many dependencies here. We don't know where we're going to end up. But the point is that in every major disruption, again, there has been an immense amount of job creation, more than the jobs that were displaced, number one. And number two, the jobs that were created, people could have never conceived of those 10 to 20 years before they were created. So these are entirely new categories. And you have a lot of Silicon Valley that falls in this camp, as you can imagine. Meta's chief AI scientist has said that the idea, and I quote, "the idea that somehow intelligent systems will come up with their own goals and take over humanity is just preposterous, it's ridiculous." So you have some really smart people saying, look, this is not going to happen. Of course, you have to put it in context. Who are these people? What are their motivations, their self-interest? We can get really cynical here. I try not to do that, even though sometimes it's difficult. I try not to let who the person is really inform how I'm going to view and whether or not I'm even going to accept or process what they're telling me. I try to look at the ideas based on the merit of the idea, based on first principles. And, there's a lot to this. There's a lot to the safety mechanisms that are in place. At the same time, I also worry about, what if the systems are so smart, they can outsmart us? So, yeah, there's a lot to be concerned about. There's also a lot of positives, obviously. That's the point here. The historical precedent, folks, point to a lot of things to make their point. One of them is the MIT research showing that, again, the majority of today's jobs had to be invented a century ago, and there are a lot more that are to come. So where do I stand here? Well, I go back and forth on these. I jump from one camp to the other. I really don't know for sure because there's some really, really smart people on both camps. And as cynical as we can all get about what their motivations might be, most of them, again, make really strong arguments. And when you look at the fundamentals of their logic, the logic is sound. But AI is so much bigger than any other disruptive force that we've ever experienced. And its impact is happening so fast that I'm not sure who's right. But here's what I'm confident about. The disruption is going to be significant, even if the net effect is hugely positive in the long run. That's the long run. So let's focus more on the shorter term and the impact of this massive wave on your business over the next 18 months or so. And let's start by talking about something I call competitive blind spots. This is something I'm going to get into a couple of times here in this episode. And I do so because it's very important. And this is the real problem that nobody's really discussing that I can tell. Most writers feel they're losing ground, but they can't identify exactly where, as I mentioned earlier. When it comes to AI, they're approaching AI randomly. Let me play with ChatGPT a little bit, maybe Claude. What do we always go to, right? Can it write this, right? We rarely use it for anything when we're experimenting. We might do a little bit of research, but most of the time, the experimentation has to do with drafting something. That approach tends to do more harm than good because it creates overwhelm, frustration, very little progress. It also creates a lot of cynicism, right? We've seen it. Oh, I tried these tools and, they can't do this. They're not good. They're hallucinating. And we can go down that road very, very easily. And I don't blame people for doing so. But the writers who are actually succeeding are those who are doing something completely different. They're not collecting tools. They're not just playing around with them. They're going beyond that, and they're doing what I would call competitive gap analysis. So they're asking questions such as, what opportunities am I not pursuing, or maybe even declining when they come to me, that I could actually handle if I had the right kind of support? Or if the mechanics and the production elements of writing are going to become increasingly commoditized. So if the act of writing a piece, if that's going to be a race to the bottom, and if that's all you're offering, that's going to be a commodity, how can I shift my business in order to remain not just viable, but to actually thrive in the years to come? That kind of thinking is not about just learning AI tools. Sure, learning the fundamentals of these tools, how to use them, where to use them, how to incorporate them into your workflows, that's all super important. But I find that a lot of people just get stuck there, and that's it. Okay, cool. So that's it. I'm going to use them to help me create outlines or brainstorm or research or write a first draft or whatever. Knowing the basics is not enough. You need to move beyond that and identify your competitive blind spots. The projects you refer out, the conversations you avoid or deflect, the industries or the domains you avoid, the opportunities you shy away from. You do that because of artificial constraints that don't actually exist anymore in a world where you have AI in your pocket, or you have access to essentially, think about this, if you had a team of professionals that you could summon to your office at any moment to borrow their expertise, to have a conversation with and learn something very important, very useful in just 20 minutes. Like if you had that and it was essentially free, what would that do for you? That's the kind of thinking that I'm urging writers and copywriters and solo marketers to start adopting. Now, I argue that asking yourself those kinds of difficult questions is becoming more and more, forget about important, it's becoming urgent. And yet, when I talk to writers everywhere, I see panic, I see confusion, I see a lot of cynicism. I see many of them digging their heads in the sand because they're either overwhelmed or because they're relying on hope, hope that all this is just going to kind of blow over somehow and things will get better on their own, that the dust will settle and things will be maybe not quite back to normal, but they'll be fine. And here's the problem with that. The disruption that I'm talking about here, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen very fast. And it's going to come as a big surprise because of the way our brains work. And it's important that you understand this. AI is an exponential force. And the problem with that is that our brains just can't process exponential change. Our brains are designed to understand linear growth, linear patterns. There's an old story out there, I believe is an old Chinese story that illustrates this idea perfectly. So a wise man, you may have heard of this, a wise man was asking a king for a simple reward. He said, I want, in exchange for what I just gave you, all I want is 1 grain of rice on the first square of a chessboard, then 2 grains on the second square, 4 on the third, doubling each time. And then just by the end of the board, just give me whatever rice that is. And the king thought, well, that sounds extremely modest. Sure. Just some rice grains, right? Yeah. But here's the thing. By the halfway point of the chessboard, you would need over 4 billion grains of rice. And by the end of the chessboard, following that pattern where you're doubling from one square to the next, you would need more rice than has ever been produced in human history. And the king couldn't see it coming because he didn't understand exponential growth. Exponential growth feels small until suddenly it doesn't. Einstein called it the 8th wonder of the world. It's something that most people don't quite understand. And you can't blame them because I don't know if I fully understand it. I just know that it's a force to be reckoned with. And I know that it's something my brain doesn't fully understand. It's a wildfire that just kind of catches and then it's completely out of control. So the capabilities of these AI tools, this is important for you to understand, the capabilities are doubling roughly every 6 to 8 months. And that is absolutely bonkers. Bonkers, bonkers, bonkers. Again, think about the grains of rice doubling every 6 to 8 months. What will that do by the time we're halfway through the chessboard? Each jump these models have made over the past 18 months alone represents roughly twice the capability of the previous version. So here's a more concrete example. On the International Mathematics Olympiad in May of 2024, GPT-4o scored 13%. Like, is it right? If it were a test, 13%. That's like terrible. I mean, that's the worst of failures. Just 4 months later, OpenAI's o1 model, 4 months later, scored 83% on the same test. 4 months later. That's a 6x improvement in 4 months. Every 6 months, these tools can do huge things they literally couldn't do before. 6 months ago, they couldn't control computers. Today, they can navigate your desktop like a human if you have them. You have them do that. 6 months from now, what's going to happen? What are the capabilities? We honestly don't know. We're somewhere in the middle of that chessboard, and most people are still thinking about individual grains of rice. This follows what I like to call and think of as the gradually, then suddenly phenomenon. And it's from that famous Hemingway quote about bankruptcy where he said, how did you go bankrupt? 2 ways, gradually, then suddenly. The gradually phase is what we've been experiencing. Changes appear incremental. They seem manageable. They seem really cool. They kind of come out of nowhere, but it doesn't seem like anything that's going to disrupt your life in a massive way. Each of those improvements seems just like a natural evolution. GPT-3, GPT-4, Claude 3, then Claude 4. All these feel like normal technological progress. The suddenly phase is what happens when multiple incremental changes compound. You reach a tipping point where change accelerates exponentially. So what felt manageable becomes overwhelming. Market positions shift dramatically in short time frames. This is why, we've been reading and watching the wildfires really all over the world for the past, 8 years or so and longer. And, as a layperson, you can say, what's going on? Why can't they contain it? With everything that we have today, all the technology and all the resources, you have to understand that a wildfire is a great example of an exponential change. It's completely out of control. It's growing at such a rapid rate that it becomes nearly impossible to contain. So back to AI, the reasoning models that have been coming out, plus computer control, plus multimodal capabilities, plus extended thinking, all these things have converged in the past 6 months, and we are at the inflection point where gradually is becoming suddenly. Now, I don't know when that suddenly part is going to happen, but we're getting close. So again, where do I think all this is going and how will it impact you? I'm not 100% certain. Nobody is. But as I approach all this information and all these trends, again, from first principles, I'm willing to make 5 predictions because I'm sure you want to at least get something from me, right? Not just kind of a bunch of hypotheticals. So I'm going to plant this flag in the ground and I'm going to make 5 what might seem like bold predictions. We'll see in 6 to 12 months if I was right. Chances are I'm not going to be right on all of these, but it'll be fun to at least talk about these. And again, I didn't just make these up. I gave these some serious thought, and I hope you find them helpful. All right, so prediction number 1. Actually, before we get there, let me kind of set the stage a little bit. There's a massive disconnect in the workplace. So McKinsey research shows that employees are 3 times more likely to be using AI than their leaders expect. So 13% of employees report using AI for more than 30% of their daily tasks, while only 4% of executives think their employees are doing so. Okay, so there's a massive disconnect. The managers are thinking it's like, almost nothing, but the employees are doing this behind their backs in many cases and using it a lot more every month. From month to month, they're finding new use cases, new applications for these tools. So what that means is that AI-enhanced work out there in the workplace is already flowing to clients, but it's happening under the radar. Clients are receiving faster research, more thorough analysis, deeper insights, but their managers don't know that AI is behind a lot of it. I think this actually explains to a large extent why there haven't been a ton of announcements in our industry where clients are saying, we're actually cutting back on our freelance pool by half. We've decided to do X. First of all, it's not necessarily the kind of announcement that companies typically make, number one. Number two, I think it's happening, again, behind closed doors. And a lot of mid-level employees are doing this, and they don't necessarily want to make it public. So here's what I predict. By the end of this year, 2025, this hidden usage is going to be way more visible. And it's going to be really the visible standard. As more AI-enhanced work reaches clients, their baseline expectations shift upward. So what used to impress them becomes the new normal. They start expecting that level of depth. They start expecting that level of speed, in terms of creating work. They start expecting better insights, ideas, and capabilities from everyone, not just their peers and their direct reports, but also from their freelance pool. Most clients are not explicitly asking, are you using AI? Some are. Frankly, they don't care about your tools. They care about what? They care about outcomes. They care about looking good to their bosses. They care about getting things done and done right. But they will notice the performance gap. So, in other words, they're using this themselves. They're used to a whole new level of expectations and performance. They're starting to get some of that from some of their freelancers, from some of their vendors. Now they're working with someone who doesn't use these tools or doesn't use them very well. It will be very obvious to them. So the conversation becomes, why does writer A always deliver such strategic insights and thorough research, while writer B gives me basic copy that feels surface level? That basic copy that felt surface level, that was probably 2-3 years ago. Great. Hey, this works. Thank you so much. You did amazing work here. The bar has been raised. Writers who use AI systematically will meet these rising expectations easily. Those who don't will seem slow, they'll seem outdated, they'll seem less capable, even if their human-only work would have been considered excellent just 2 years ago. The AI usage stays invisible, but their performance gap becomes obvious. So, what am I talking about here? What's the prediction here? Well, I think for writers, this means 3 things. First, stop hiding the fact that you're incorporating AI in your workflows. Second, start leading AI conversations with clients. And third, position AI as a strategic advantage, not a cost-cutting measure. So don't set yourself up for clients asking you to lower your fees. Okay, there's a way you can present yourself and position your value as a strategic advantage and not put yourself in a position where now they want to pay you less. So my prediction here is that over the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to get over this whole, well, I don't want to tell clients or prospects that I use AI. And it's just going to be a topic of conversation, open conversation, because the bar would have been raised to a point where you just need to be there anyway. I've experienced a shift in my own business. So a year ago, I was defensive about using AI with my writing clients. Now I proactively discuss it as part of my value proposition. It's just become a selling point, not something to hide. And we find new ways of using these tools. In fact, even in areas of operations, not just pure marketing. And that's really exciting to me. All right, so that's prediction number 1. Prediction number 2 is that there will be a big role flip from producer to conductor. So according to the World Economic Forum, 70% of skills in most jobs will change by 2030. And I would argue that's probably conservative. It's probably going to be much greater. Your role is going to shift from producer to conductor. But here's what conductor actually means. And it's not what most people think. It's not just managing AI tools. It's orchestrating human plus AI resources. So it's strategic thinking about what should be human versus AI. It's quality control and creative direction. Client relationships and client guidance remain completely human. Author Seth Godin had this vision of AI becoming, quote, a thoughtful, patient, and trusted friend that's focused on connections and networks. Now, notice he didn't say replacement, because it's not a replacement, but rather it's an enhancement of human capabilities. Now, here's what that looks like in practice. Research gets conducted by AI, but insights are interpreted by humans. First drafts maybe get written by AI, but guess what? Strategic positioning comes from humans. Data analysis happens through AI, but client recommendations are made by humans. And here's the key point. This only amplifies your value. It doesn't diminish it. You're not competing on efficiency anymore. That's a start. Productivity, efficiency, that's a great start, but that's not going to be enough. You're going to have to compete on insight, judgment, and strategic thinking. Because let me tell you, these tools, they have a specific type of intelligence. And one of them is pattern recognition. And it can do it way better than any human. But it doesn't have a point of view. It doesn't have judgment. It doesn't have discernment. It doesn't have taste. That part remains and will continue to remain as far as we can tell, for many years, uniquely human. And that's really what we want at the end of the day. We want a lot of the stuff that we have just accepted as things that we just going to have to do. It's part of the work, it's part of the job, it's part of the role. But we never stop to ask ourselves, well, how much of that is really in my zone of genius? And how much of that, gosh, if I had a machine that could do it, would I give it to a machine to at least take the first pass at it? I would argue that there's a lot in our work and our workflows that we would be willing to make that trade on. Okay. So prediction number 2, we're going to be becoming, instead of producers, we're going to be becoming conductors. Prediction number 3, the capability revolution. This is a big one, and the one I hinted at a little bit earlier. I talked about it a little bit, but I'm going to expand on it here. The biggest competitive advantage will not be AI tool mastery. It will be systematic identification and closure of capability gaps. So most writers sense that they're losing ground, but they can't, again, pinpoint why or where. They're declining projects, or maybe avoiding emerging opportunities to do more and better paying work with clients because they're thinking, well, that's not really what I do. I don't have experience in that. And their income is therefore capped by what we could call artificial self-imposed constraints based on their past experience. But guess what? AI just shattered that ceiling entirely. AI removes the knowledge constraints that used to limit what opportunities you could confidently take on. So it shifts your thinking from what do I already know to, what can I confidently figure out? It can go take you from, I don't do that, to let me show you what's possible. In a recent episode, I talk about these home services clients that I landed last year. They needed brand positioning sprints. They needed messaging platforms, competitive analysis, things that I only heard about. I mean, I knew what they were. I mean, it's not that I was completely ignorant, but I had never done myself end to end. And a few years ago, I would have said, look, that's just not what I do. I have someone I can bring in and, you can work with them on that and I'll work with them. Yeah. And I would have referred that out. Thousands of dollars walking out the door. But this time I had AI and I was nervous, but my thinking changed completely when I started using Perplexity and Claude to walk me through proven brand positioning frameworks to help me customize them for these clients, for home services companies, even role play potential client objections so I could prepare responses, create all kinds of interesting customer avatars, and then just go from there. It was so much fun. It was a truly creative exercise or series of exercises that I just lost myself in. It was so much fun. I was using parts of my brain that I really wasn't using to their fullest potential up until then, or at least it felt that way. And I felt really energized for the first time in a long time in terms of doing client work. And by the way, what I delivered to the client, it wasn't just good enough. It was solid. My clients were thrilled with the strategic thinking behind it, the thoughtfulness, the practical applicability of everything I provided. It worked out really, really well. And it did so because I wasn't winging it. I want to stress something here. I had access to, again, the collective knowledge of experts who had been doing this work for decades. And then I brought what? I brought my own experience, my own critical thinking, my own judgment, discernment, and taste to the mix. So, it wasn't, I can't put my 14-year-old in front of ChatGPT and have him do this on his own. It's just not going to work. He doesn't have enough experience. He doesn't have that lived experience. He doesn't know the fundamentals. I already had all of that. I just didn't have anything beyond the core foundational elements, beyond the building blocks. And by the way, this is what's really key. I want to stress that I don't want to be misunderstood here. I'm not saying that you can be clueless. You have to have some of the foundational knowledge and not try to use these tools to become an expert imposter. Okay. So I really want to stress that. I would argue that almost everyone listening to this already has that, but they believe that not ticking every single box makes them unqualified. And I would challenge you to rethink that. You need a certain level of knowledge and lived experience to be able to leverage these tools the way I'm suggesting. But a foundational level of knowledge and experience is going to take you a long way. as long as you know how to really coax these tools, get the most out of them. And that's what most writers fail to grasp, thinking they have to be the experts already going into it. So how do you uncover these opportunities for yourself? What exactly am I talking about here? Well, here's a systematic approach I would recommend you take. I would work on identifying your biggest capability gaps across 6 categories. And there might be more, but these are the ones that I've really, when working with coaching clients and just myself with my own clients, the ones that have come up more than a couple of times. In no particular order. Let's start with craft gaps. So, for example, formats you avoid, like case studies or white paper, writing specific types of projects, doing a specific type of writing, right? Craft gaps. Production gaps would be the second. So approaches and workflows for completing solid work faster. Lots of opportunity here. How can I get this stuff done better and faster? Third one would be what I would call industry gaps. So industries, domains, sectors that you wouldn't touch, like let's say healthcare or SaaS, because you don't feel you have the insider knowledge or the experience there. The next one would be domain gaps. So topics, areas, disciplines that make you uncomfortable, like technical subjects, and you've avoided them as a result. Process gaps, business development weaknesses, like discovery calls, some kind of specific type of research, working with a couple of complementary freelancers. You haven't worked directly with a designer before. So the kind of the back and forth and the workflows now with another party, how do you deal? So all of that falls under process gaps. And then finally, strategic gaps. So what do I mean by strategic gaps? Well, this is shifting from just doer, from hands work to head work. So advisory conversations that you might deflect or avoid because you know what you might suggest to the client, but you're too shy to say anything or you feel unqualified. But, upon further reflection, you can see that the client is about to make a big mistake. And if you spoke up and you had a little bit more self-assurance because you had additional capabilities, you would feel more comfortable giving them some ideas and then asking if you might be able to help them more in that area. The point is, each new capability you develop in any or all of these 6 areas creates a compounded effect. We already talked about the power of compounding, and it builds confidence for the next challenge. And it creates a reputation as someone who tackles complex problems. It opens doors to higher value opportunities. And again, those things do what? They improve your confidence. So when you have improved confidence, then you keep stretching yourself. You keep doing more, asking for more, being bolder. And you can see how this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Most writers could identify their top 3 capability gaps in 15 minutes. So that's probably not an issue for you. The important question that I would pose here is, will you work systematically to close those gaps or keep putting yourself at a disadvantage? Something to ponder today. All right, moving on. Prediction number 4. Human judgment becomes the premium skill. Research from consulting firm McKinsey shows that these new AI reasoning models that have been coming out this year, like O3, Gemini 2.5 Pro, and the upcoming GPT 5.0, give users a human-like thought partner. Not just an information retrieval and synthesis engine, but like truly someone, it feels like you have someone in the room with a very high IQ who's working for $20 a month. You almost feel guilty. You almost feel like I have a huge competitive advantage here. Once you realize that, once that light bulb goes off, you start recognizing what the possibilities could be. So to put it another way, as AI gets better at handling 80% of rote or mechanical tasks in any process, human discernment for the critical 20% becomes exponentially more valuable. I love how my colleague and coaching client, Becky Lawlor, explains this. She runs a boutique original research content agency called Redpoint. And recently she posted this on LinkedIn. She said, and I quote, "AI is supposed to take my job. So why hasn't it? I'm convinced it's because of the 80-20 rule, and the 20% that's most important still belongs to humans." And then she listed what AI cannot do. It's a whole list of things. I think I caught most of them. I'm going to read them to you. Catch the insight buried 3/4 into an interview that shifts the entire angle. Flag the sentence that sounds smart but says nothing. Bring a point of view grounded in real-world experience. Adjust tone when a piece starts sounding more like a pitch than a conversation. Know when to simplify or when to add nuance. Restructure a draft to tell a better story. Cut a paragraph that technically works but doesn't add value. Push back on the brief or see around the corner. Her conclusion was, AI didn't write the stronger piece, the stronger writer did. And she was being modest. I can tell you after working with Becky for years on and off, she brings even more than this to the table. And what she does bring, AI cannot replicate. That's their true value. That's the 20%. That's the premium skill, the judgment, discernment, the taste. So the same creative brief given to two writers using AI produces wildly different results. The tool is the same. The difference is who's doing the prompting, who's making the decisions, who's bringing the thinking. As AI handles more of that execution, human judgment becomes more valuable, not less. And I predict that premium rates will go to those who bring an exceptional level of discernment, judgment, and taste. All right, final prediction, number 5, what I would call the 18-month divergence point. So this is fascinating. Research from PwC predicts that companies who pull ahead with AI adoption will likely stay there, similar to how early internet platform companies maintained their dominance, 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. And I remember that time, and that was true. Everything that I'm reading, everything that I'm watching, everything I'm consuming regarding AI, and I spend probably a little too much time every week immersing myself in this stuff, it points to a short window where positioning becomes permanent. Thought leaders in AI are warning that by the end of 2025, the large majority of leaders will feel they are behind the leaders themselves, and the risk to revenue, profit margin, and market share will be very real. Unlike previous technology shifts that took years to fully penetrate markets, AI capabilities, again, they're improving so rapidly that competitive gaps are forming and hardening within months, not years. Now, is that going to be true for you over the next 6 months? Probably not. I'm not saying you got to hurry because by the end of 2025, this is over. And if you're not on the other side, it's game over. Not at all. I'm saying it looks like an 18-month window to me. That's feeling right to me based on everything that I'm consuming. I'll give you 3 reasons. First, the current pace of AI advancements mean the capabilities, again, will double at least twice more in this time frame, possibly 3 times. Second, it takes time to systematically build new capabilities. You can't do it overnight. And third, market awareness is reaching a tipping point where competitive advantages become entrenched. It becomes too hard for anyone else to catch up. You've made such rapid and drastic advancements that you just have a massive lead, and it just becomes too difficult for others to catch up. So the divergence that's coming up is gap-aware writers will systematically identify and close capability gaps. And gap-blind writers, if we want to call them that, will continue the same old, either avoiding these tools or just kind of randomly playing with them and adopting them without any kind of systematic strategy behind that. And the distance between them is going to become insurmountable after a certain amount of time. Because again, because of the compounded growth and improvements that you will get if you're in the camp of, hey, I'm actually using these very strategically and in a very thoughtful way, and I'm continually looking for other ideas and how I can leverage them. So this isn't just about staying competitive. Really, it's about positioning yourself for exponential growth versus managed decline, if we want to call it that. The choice is between systematic capability expansion and just scattered learning, or between strategic positioning and reactive tool chasing. I think you can see the difference. So, what does this all mean for you? Before I get to the strategic implications, I want to acknowledge something. I know many of you are listening to this and thinking, Ed, I hear what you're saying about the competitive positioning, but I have serious reservations about this whole AI thing. And look, I get it. I really do. I read the post. I have the conversations. I've listened to people. I get it. You're not technophobic. You're not ignorant about how these systems work. You understand LLMs. You know the difference between consumer AI and enterprise AI implementations. You've probably tested these tools yourself quite a bit, maybe even use them daily. Your concerns aren't about the technology itself. They're about how it's being developed and deployed. Maybe you're concerned about the environmental impact of massive data centers or the questionable data collection practices of these companies. The fact that these systems hallucinate and make things up, like 10, 20% of the time? But so many people just don't even bother to fact check and just cite these, whatever comes out of these tools as authoritative sources. Maybe you're concerned about the fact that a handful of tech companies are essentially taking the world's creative output without permission to train their models. You value human creativity. You value autonomy. You value craftsmanship. You enjoy using your brain, pushing yourself, and creating something uniquely yours. Maybe you've seen what passes for AI-generated content and you thought, oh, great. This is what we're supposed to be excited about, right? Bad email copy, knockoff art, terrible music made by fake AI bands. And I hear you. I see you. I respect all of this. These are legitimate concerns from thoughtful people who care deeply about their craft and their community. And I get it. Here's the thing, though. I can hold these concerns in my mind while simultaneously recognizing that market forces are moving, regardless of how we feel about them. The window for positioning yourself strategically is real. It's narrowing. Who knows if it's 6 months, 12, 18 months? Who knows if it's 3 years or longer? I don't know. But I know that it is narrowing, and I think everyone would agree on that. Waiting feels safer, but it's actually the riskier choice when you consider the compounding effects of early adoption versus late adoption. We've talked about those today. And here's what I want to be crystal clear about. This isn't a binary choice. I think one of the worst things that has happened in our society, at least I can't speak outside of the US, but certainly in the US, is that this polarization of our society is breaking people's brains because everything has to fall in camp 1 or camp 2, camp A or camp B, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal. And life is not that simple. And life is complex. Most issues are complex. Most issues are not binary choices. I personally refuse to fall into that. Okay. You don't have to become an AI lover to think strategically about your business positioning. You can have all these concerns about the ethics of these companies and how they operate, and you can recognize that client expectations are shifting. You can prefer human creativity and also acknowledge that some competitors are using these tools to deliver faster, more comprehensive research. You can value craftsmanship and realize that the market rewards results over methodology. So with that, here's a systematic approach I recommend. Stop random AI tool experimentation or playing around. And sure, that's where we all start. I'm not judging you. I started the same way, just playing around with these tools. But you need to move on beyond that phase. You need to find a way to get the fundamentals down as quickly as possible, get a really good working knowledge of this stuff. By the way, a little plug for my AI Advantage Bootcamp, looking to run it again this fall. So shameless plug, sorry about that. But yeah, something like that, whether you learn it from me, you learn it yourself out there, you do your own research, you learn it from somebody else, doesn't really matter, but get the fundamentals down, and then start finding and assessing your own capability gaps. From there, start building a strategic expansion plan that moves you from being an order taker to someone who changes the conversations they have with their prospects and clients. You will not be able to be an order taker forever. I would argue that that's going to end in the next 18 months. I could be wrong. And what by order taking, I mean that you're used to just clients contacting you. Hey, I got this. Are you interested? Or you're doing outreach saying, can I help you with X, Y, or Z? And somebody says yes. And then you price it and you get it and you start, right? So that model that's almost over. That doesn't have too long a shelf life. It's going to be done soon. And you want to be instead someone who leverages their full skill set and experience, and with the help of AI as a thought partner can deliver 2x the capability that you had before, 5x the capability, even, believe it or not, 10x the capability. I know that sounds ridiculous. Once you understand, once you get into this, you're going to see that what I'm saying is true. You can massively expand your capabilities. And you don't have to get there overnight. You can take it one step at a time. But I urge you to take those first baby steps sooner than later. When you do that, all kinds of good things start to become possible. You start taking on projects you'd previously declined. You command higher rates for strategic value. You build a reputation as someone who solves complex challenges. You create a business that's resilient and growth-oriented. And unfortunately, the alternative is not great. Continuing to operate within your traditional, what I would call now artificial constraints, because that's what they are. They shouldn't be constraints anymore. Watching competitors pull ahead every month, fighting for a shrinking pool of ready-made writing projects where the client just needs a writer to get it done and nothing more. That's a rapidly shrinking pool of opportunities. And I want to be clear about something. The opportunities, and I mentioned this earlier, the opportunities that are already emerging for people like us are huge. But you may not like the flavor of many of these opportunities. They may feel uncomfortable. It's not that they're going to go against your code of conduct or anything like that. It's not that they're going to feel unethical. It's that you're going to think, oh, I have to do that. Do I have to advise them on, maybe some content calendar ideas and help them with their editorial calendar? I've never done anything like that before. It feels uncomfortable. That's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's completely okay. I respect that. I would argue that success in this world is going to require you to become comfortable being uncomfortable. Some writers will look at this landscape and decide they want to stay focused on what they've always done. Some will decide that they want to transition out of writing entirely and find something else to do for a living. Others will decide to retire early. I've been seeing some of that already. And others are going to embrace the capability expansion approach. There's no right or wrong here. I'm just laying out kind of the different paths and the options, trying to be as real as possible so you can figure out, hey, what path is probably right for me? All of them are valid choices, but what's not valid is pretending you don't have to make a choice at all. Okay, so I'm just going to say that right now. That is not a valid choice. Make a choice. Decide something, but don't just stand there when that hurricane just comes through and not take shelter just because, no, this is my beach. That's not an option. 6 months from now, you'll either be systematically expanding your capabilities or still making excuses about why certain opportunities aren't for you. The writers who understand this, the writers who start building expanded capabilities now, are going to thrive, everything else being equal. The ones who stay locked in current constraints are going to find the market increasingly difficult. That I would definitely bet on. Now, before I give you a final action step here, let me be crystal clear about two things. When I talk about identifying capability gaps, I'm not saying you have to expand your service offerings or completely change what you do, and especially to do that overnight. You can absolutely stay in your lane if that lane is profitable. So A website writer or copywriter can keep writing websites. A fundraising copywriter can keep writing fundraising copy. What I'm really talking about is using AI to become exponentially better at whatever lane you're already in. Let me repeat that because this is so important. What I'm suggesting is that you use AI and you leverage AI to become exponentially better at whatever lane you're already in or have chosen for yourself. Of course, if that then leads you down a very exciting new or evolved path that you're thrilled about, fantastic. You don't have to get married to it forever. You can evolve. But I'm not suggesting you have to overhaul your business or that you have to do that overnight. That website copywriter could use AI to analyze their drafts from multiple perspectives. They can use it to conduct deeper, comprehensive research that makes their recommendations more strategic. They can better work with it to better understand the client's business model and industry dynamics, or identify gaps in their proposals and calibrate their tone to match specific brand voices better, more precisely. None of that requires expanding into content marketing or case studies, for example, but it makes them a dramatically more valuable website writer because now there's someone who brings strategic insights rather than just execution. So again, this isn't a binary choice between expand your offerings or die. I cannot stress this enough. Don't fall into that false dichotomy. Some writers will choose to expand what they offer. Others will choose to deepen and enhance what they already do. Both approaches work. The key is systematic capability building rather than random tool adoption. Whether you're expanding horizontally into new services or vertically into deeper expertise or some other way of expanding your capabilities, AI can help you get there faster and more confidently than trying to figure this out on your own. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to mention is that my stance on AI is pretty bullish. It's probably not going to come as a surprise when I tell you that I'm, pretty much all in on AI, despite all the concerns that I mentioned earlier. I know there are plenty of concerns, everything from ethical concerns to environmental issues, all the existential stuff that, the world will end. I share all those concerns with you. I'm not stupid. I'm not blind. But again, I feel strongly that I can, guess what? You and I, we can be both. We can be concerned about those issues and bullish on how we can leverage these tools to do great, fulfilling work while growing our income and our level of financial, creative, and time freedom. Essentially, we can learn how to work with this technology to earn more in less time doing work you love for better clients. Where have you heard that before, right? And that's why a huge part of my focus as a coach, teacher, mentor, and podcast host will continue to shift to this topic. So I'm just letting you know now that you're going to be hearing a lot more about this from me over the coming months. All the stuff about AI, how you can leverage it, practical applications and strategies for your business. I realize that not everyone in my audience wants this. I respect that. But I've chosen a lane, and I want to let you know up front what to expect from me and from the show going forward. It's going to be very much AI focused. My trainings, my coaching, pretty much everything I do is going to be very much AI centric. This is too big an issue for me to ignore. And it's the biggest shift and disruption, both good and bad, of my lifetime. I'm passionate about the topic, and I feel called to lead my community, my tribe in this journey of discovery. So here's one simple action step you can get started with. Identify your biggest capability gap. Is it an industry that you kind of shy away from? A format you've never mastered? A project type? A type of strategic conversation you deflect? Some other way you could potentially help clients if you had a tool that could help fill whatever gaps you had. It could be a number of things, but just pick one. Pick one gap that, if filled, would immediately open new opportunities for your business. And then start experimenting with using AI to fill that gap. You might be surprised at what becomes possible when you stop limiting yourself to your own lived experience, your own set of skills and thinking that it all has to come from you. Your experience doesn't have to be your income limit anymore. Your experience doesn't have to define the boundaries of what's possible. The tools to make this transformation are already available to you. The writers who embrace this systematically are going to build businesses that are more resilient, more profitable, and frankly, more interesting than what most of us thought possible just 2 years ago. I'm Ed Gandia. Thanks for listening. If this episode resonated with you, I'd be honored if you shared it with a friend or colleague who might find it valuable. Until next time, keep writing, keep adapting, keep building the business you actually want, not just the one you think you're limited to. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And just a quick reminder to grab your free copy of my latest book, Earn More in Less Time: The Proven Mindset, Strategies, and Actions to Prosper as a Freelance Writer. You can get your free copy at b2blauncher.com, where you will also find the detailed show notes to this and all my other episodes. Enjoy and have a great day.